On today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast, we have a one-on-one conversation with wide receiver coach from San Jose State, Billy Ray. Sarge is at the combine, gearing up for it. It's going to be a good week, y'all.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. We are your Texans Credential Media member and Texans football analyst, John Hickman. That is Big Sarge, who is out there in Indy right now, holding it down. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for being a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On today's show, we'll be looking at gearing up for the combine, what we should expect this week. But we have a very good one-on-one conversation with Coach Billy Ray Stutzmann, wide receiver coach, actually just promoted to wide receivers coach this, I think like a week or two ago, in January. So I was a senior offensive assistant for the San Jose State Spartans last year. Had a very good time to be around both Nick Nash and that wide receiving group. So without further ado, let's dive into it. And welcome our Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. As promised, a one-on-one with Coach Billy Ray Stutzmann. Welcome to the show, San Jose State's now wide receiver coach. Was senior offensive assistant last year, got promoted to be the wide receivers coach moving forward. And so I kind of want to start right there, Coach, and thank you for stopping by, of course. But last year, over 4,100 passing yards, first in the Mountain West Conference, fifth in the nation. Can you tell our listeners about the mindset going into the 2024 season and how you got to help get the most out of the wide receivers on their roster altogether?
Yeah, first off, appreciate you having me on here, John. It's a huge honor to join your guys' podcast. I caught a couple last week just to kind of get myself familiar. But, leading into last season, this offense speaks for itself. Right. When you look at the production of the receivers in the past years, in this spread and shred offense, the long lineup of guys that came in that, produced great numbers and got their shot at the NFL. I think just seeing those guys and how they entered the offense with the right mindset, being all in. Because we do put a lot on the receivers, right? There's a lot of reading on the run. We teach those guys coverage recognition, and there's so much that goes into it because it's not just a cookie cutter. You run a dig, you run a post here. You got 4 or 5 options on some of these plays, on some of these concepts. So just having them understand you're going to have some freedom within this offense, right? You're going to have to add your style to this offense, to the receiver play, and having those guys understand that kind of mindset, like, shoot, I can add some style to this. I could be myself out here. I don't have to be a robot. Those guys bought in. And that's kind of the mindset we go into it, where we put a lot of ownership on the receivers and as an offense as well. But there's so much on the receivers' plates, but giving them that much freedom, giving them that much responsibility, I think holds true to some of those guys, and just having the right mindset, just understanding, hey, let's take this thing and I'll take it and let's roll with it.
And that was a talking point, a discussion point rather, for Nick Nash. We're going to talk about Nick Nash and another wide receiver in the room that you had an opportunity to coach last year. Mm-hmm. But I was reading an article, and going into last season, it seemed like Nick Nash was a little bit on the fence about whether or not he wanted to return or continue to play football. But the offense that was installed, he came away from, I guess, a meeting or a conversation with a coach or someone thinking to himself, hey, this is something that I can flourish in. And then a season later, he's being talked about as a top 4, 5, 6 round pick with opportunity to play in the NFL. How much of that offense really just, not only the wide receivers, but all together, really allow players to be comfortable and allow for that comfortability to translate on the field?
Mm-hmm. Well, going back to, when we first got this job, with Coach Neil Matalowo coming in, there's a lot of uncertainty, right? He's been at Navy for 20 plus years, running the triple option. So there was a little bit of uncertainty from Nick Nash's side of it. So that's understandable. But, my brother coming in, he's the offensive coordinator, bringing in this offense and, just within the first couple hours of getting the job, I know my brother was on the phone a lot with them, just telling them, hey, we're going to get you the football. We're going to give you the freedom. We're going to revolve this offense around you, and I don't think a year ago that any one of us coaches or even players or even Nick Nash would have said, this is the success you're going to receive, right? It's all based on, how much you put into it, the film room, understanding the playbook. But just having that kind of mentality of, hey, this is going to be brand new. We could, shock some people entering this conference. That, I know we're, running this offense at Hawaii, but that was a few years ago. But, just getting him to buy into, hey, the production is going to be there. We just need you to fill this role. He understood what we were trying to do with it. We understood what we were trying to do with him, but ultimately the main conversation with Nash was, you're going to be the guy. We know what you did last year. We know what you can do. But yeah, I don't think any of us knew he was going to be a Triple Crown winner when it was all said and done. I
mean, really had an impressive year, and to consider, I guess, the thought in his mind, whether or not he wanted to continue and, to be a Triple Crown winner, that's amazing. I'm going to get back to that Triple Crown winner point, because he reminds me of a player that plays for the LA Rams right now. He's looking for a new home, so we'll come back to that. But to get on Nick Nash, how fun was it coaching Nash? I mean, he's a former QB. The last 2 seasons, he switched over to wide receiver, grew 2 inches over one season. He became a valuable weapon for that offense, and was one that, I guess the question is, was it an easy transition for him, or did you get a lot of late night texts asking, okay, how do I get better? Or, coach, I'm picking your brain, or, how can I sit in this zone better? How can I attack defenses better? Was it easy for him when you came in, or just the overall experience of coaching Nash?
Shoot, man, it was such a joy. That kid does everything the right way. He led the receiving room the right way, did everything he needed to. But shoot, when it came to schematics, that kid, I mean, he got it like that. Talking about coverages, how defenders are going to move around, where guys are supposed to be. That was easy. That was the easy part, because, having that quarterback background, you need to understand what everyone's doing on the field, right? So he had a great sense when it came to the scheme and understand the playbook. When it came to receiver play, we all understand, there's a lot that goes into it, right? And especially a transition from quarterback, where you don't run around as much. The cuts are a little different. You got to understand, a little more body movement, getting by defenders. We spend a lot of time on technique, whether you're, playing within your frame, right? Keeping your feet within your frame, not getting too elongated. Because you mentioned he did grow a couple inches, a couple years ago, within college. So he still had to get used to the extra length there, right? So a lot of times, he would make cuts outside his frame. But it was just refining those skills, right? And just being able to, he's such a fluid athlete to begin with. It was easy, just shorten up your stride a little bit. When we're making these double moves or these certain cuts, right? Just keep it underneath your frame and got to explode out of your brakes. But I love Nick Nash. He's such a good kid. Or I should say young man now, 25 years old, but he did everything the right way. He's someone that you wish you had 11 of them on the field every play. He was a tough competitor, high competitor. I'll give him that. High competitor, but just loves ball. And it was easy to be around him.
That was the first part of our conversation with wide receiver coach Billy Ray Stutzmann. Stay tuned. We have a part 2.
Welcome back in, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. As promised, part 2 of our one-on-one conversation with Coach Billy Ray. Coach, you mentioned something that a lot of people kind of get scared away from, and that's being 25 years old.
Right.
But when you look at, I guess, the process of him transitioning into another position, and also working at his craft, owning his craft at 25, should the perspective change from the outside looking in, and should we all think to ourselves, this is a young man that with his time learned something new, got better at it, and became, like you mentioned, a Triple Crown winner? Should we shy away from the age, Or is that something that NFL teams should look and say, this is a guy that former quarterback can understand what an offense is supposed to look like. We should take a chance on.
I don't think age is that much of a factor in my opinion. But everyone has their own opinion. They're they can have that. But the thing that I look back on is, the old saying, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And, everyone's looking at Nick Nash as the old dog, but I promise you, he's still a dog at heart. He's going to come out fighting. He's going to come out perfecting his craft. He's going to do everything he needs to. And, when you look at his college career, the durability stands out, right? He played damn near every snap for us this past season in the slot. He took some reps out wide out, whether it was, tight man, loose man, zone coverage. He was attacking it all. And he's in the training room taking care of his body. He understands, how his body works, which was big this season. Just doing what you need to perform on the field on Saturdays, right? Hopefully it'll be Sundays this coming season. But I don't think age should be much of a factor just because he has the right mentality. He's a mature young man that knows what it takes to keep his body moving the right way, to keep him feeling, at the top of his game. So, he's so young in the receiver world. I think someone that takes a chance on him is going to get someone that they're going to be very happy with.
And not only that, I watch this tape and I've been breaking them down and watching them. What really stands out the most? It may not be the speed. You definitely see his catch radius is huge. He can go up and grab the ball, but it's how he's grabbing the ball. He may have top 3 hands in this draft.
Oh my goodness. The amount of it's easy to say he could do that against Sac State, Kennesaw State, right? But when he's doing it against Oregon State, Washington State, right, Boise State, Stanford, he's making some of these unreal catches against guys that he'll probably see on Sundays eventually, right? But yeah, you point out his catch radius. There's some balls there's a deep pass over the middle that I could picture against Washington State where he just goes up and plucks it. And it's like, we're just looking around like, did he just make that catch? Like, okay, he's that guy, and that his hands, in practice, he's making one-handed catches that are way outside his body frame. It's just like, this dude will catch anything that comes his way. No doubt about it.
If you could think of any player in the league, past or present, that you would say, hey, man, I've been around Nick Nash and I've seen a lot of good football. You yourself, former wide receiver, so you know what good wide receiver play looks like. Who would you compare Nash to?
Well, there's one person. Well, let's see. This is going way back, and he had a small career in the NFL. But Greg Salas, he was a former Hawaii football player. Racked up just about 2,000 yards in a season. This was back in 2009. So I'm not sure how many people would know Greg Salas.
Is that the Cole Brennan years?
He came right after Cole Brennan.
Okay.
Yeah, and bigger frame. He was about 6'3", probably about 205, around the same frame. But if you don't know that name, I would point out Cooper Kupp, just because when you hear Cooper Kupp speak about football, his IQ is through the roof. He's talking about leverages, he's talking about coverages, multiple defenders on multiple snaps, and it's just like, this dude is, he's just a ball junkie. And when you talk to Nick Nash and when you start breaking down film with Nash, it's just like, he's a film junkie. He knows the ins and outs of defenses. He knows the ins and outs of our scheme. So, whether it's teaching him a concept or whether he's attacking a defense, I think the IQ is something that sets him apart. And, I think Cooper Kupp is along those lines where you talk football, it's like, okay, you're talking to just about a coach, at that point where they understand everything what's happening on the field.
It sounds like he can always come back and get a job at San Jose State to coach.
Absolutely. If he wants to come coach with me, hey, come on down, man.
No, I absolutely. When I look at his film and I look at the transition of where he is now, he reminds me of a combination of Cooper Kupp and Julian Edelman, right? And just the hard work to switch positions and kind of do it on the fly. So I'm a huge fan of Nick Nash. I think that he would be an amazing pickup for the Houston Texans. I think a wide receiver room here in Houston, as we cover, that needs players to come in and can help raise the floor. Before we leave, Coach, 2 more questions for you, because we talked about Nick Nash, but there's also another player who caught nearly 19 yards per catch for you guys last year, and that's Justin Lockhart. Excuse me. He's not getting a lot of talk and recognition right now. What could you tell this Texan fans about this young man?
Justin Lockhart, that boy can fly. I mean, he was arguably the fastest receiver on our team, fastest player on our team this past season. And he works his butt off. He'll give you everything he got in his tank. He'll come down with a lot of those 50-50 balls as well. But when you look at just speed and going and tracking the ball downfield and being able to come down with those, he's one of the better guys I've been around. And he's a long frame, 6'2", and shoot, man, that I can't say enough about his speed. I mean, we haven't been around a lot of guys that could run like him.
Last question, Coach. In your Twitter bio, you have Child of God. How much did faith help you guys in that room this year, just believing and coming together as a brotherhood to get over humps and to, just be a better overall program together?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every day we started practice with a prayer. We'd be on the field, before pre-practice started, circle up as a receiving group. We have, I used to call him, one of our reverends, another slot back, Sebastian Macaluso, but he'd say a prayer every practice, and we rely on God. We talk a lot about our faith, whether it was meetings or just kind of, guys would come in the offices and shoot, man, just sit down and pray, talk to God, because that ultimately, when everything fades, God's always going to be there. So that's something that we relied heavy on, is just our faith coming together. We break bread together. I would have the receivers over my house, always start with a prayer and, just be open about faith. That's huge for us. Just being able to talk about it, lean on each other, lean on God. It was a huge part of us coming together, because a lot of our guys are very spiritual. And whether, they say it or not, everyone, joins in on our prayer. And, if someone wants to lead the prayer, they're more than welcome to. But we do put a lot of our faith in the public eye within each other.
Coach, thank you for taking time out your busy schedule to stop by. I really appreciate it. Hopefully our fans and listeners were able to take something away from it. And good luck on this upcoming season.
Oh, thank you, John. I appreciate it. And, thank you most of all for giving me an opportunity to talk about our guys. It means a lot to us, and anything that we can do to help our guys get more publicity, positive publicity, I'm all for it. So again, thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Coach.
All right.
Welcome back, Locked On Texans listeners and viewers. Before we talk about the combine, which is where Sarge is right now up in Indy holding it down, I want to add the conversation that Coach Billy Ray and I had on screen was great, but he also gave me a few nuggets off screen. Number one, with Nick Caley coming over to the Houston Texans and the idea of what he's going to bring, he mentioned that Nick Nash is a willing blocker. He needs to work on his base a little bit, but he'll go out there and make that contact. That's an area of growth for him. And also that he could be more fit in the NFL, better fit in the NFL as a slot receiver. Won't have that straight line speed to beat DBs on the outside, but on the inside, he can create matchups. And that's what we saw from the San Jose State football team last year at times, giving him opportunities to create mismatches. Now, Sarge, you're out there in Indy. It's time to gear up for the combine. What are you excited for this week, man?
John, what I'm more excited about is to get an opportunity to speak once again with head coach D'Amico Ryans. But it's been a while since we talked to executive vice president and general manager Nick Caserio, and it's time for us to pick his brain. And I know that's not going to be everybody who is normally on the beat here in Indianapolis, but for the few of us that are here, for the ones that are here, I know that we're not just going to let him, be able to squeak by with some of the answers that he's going to want to give us. Now, let me be fair, because sometimes he doesn't answer all the questions, or he'll, spin us in circles sometimes. And I mean, this isn't something that he hasn't laughed about himself. We've told him about this before. But I'm really curious to pick his brain to see what are we gonna what are you here for? Like that's the bigger question for me when I'm here at the combine for Nick Caserio. What are you here for? Are you here for interior offensive lineman? Are you here for a interior defensive lineman? Are you here for a place kicker? Because a lot of people don't think about those type of things. Are you here for a wide receiver? Now, those are probably the questions that he's not going to answer. But at least if we ask him on the record just to see where his mindset is, and I know that he's not going to give away anything, but at least to find out where his mindset is, or give us a kind of like a quick glance on what the draft is going to look like for the Houston Texans and what this offseason, especially with the way that he has to restructure these, with the way that he has to restructure some of these contracts. How that's going to happen, John. I'm not going to get a chance to see every position group perform here because I have to get back. I have other obligations with the Houston Rockets as well, and so I won't be here. And later on in the week, the position groups that are going, the Houston Texans really won't be taking a look at those guys anyway. And so what I will have an opportunity to do, though, John, on Wednesday after. Before Nick Caserio talks, we'll get a chance to talk to some of the defensive linemen, And John, there will be some linebackers there, and there will be some place kickers there. And so this is a defensive. It'll be a defensive day for the participants here at the combine. Just as far as interviews are concerned, they go through their medicals, come to the interviews, and then as far as talking to us is concerned, and they'll start Thursday on the field. So that's what I'm most looking forward to, John. I don't know if there's anybody that stands out enough for the Houston Texans to either jump up in the draft to get right now, or if there's somebody that, if they stand pat at number 25, John, you have been on the record by saying that they can move back to a couple of spots and gain some more later round draft picks. So that's just some of the things that I'm looking forward to. You're on mute.
My apologies, guys. It's been a rough recording night for those y'all won't know behind the scenes, but I am very interested to see if Nick Caserio look over what Philly was able to do, protecting their quarterback, building from the inside out, which is something that, hey, we've heard Nick Haley say. I'm interested to see if they view some of these tackles coming out as maybe long-term guard replacements to fill in the void at right guard. We talked about this, whether or not we feel like, hey, maybe Nick Haley and Cole Popovich can, get the best out of Shaq Mason. I don't think so, right? And so if Tyler Booker is gone, the next question for me, Sarge, is, because this isn't a pretty impressive guard draft for me.
Yeah.
Well, there's some tackles coming out that can use some work at tackle that may just be able to slide right in and be maybe a Pro Bowl guard in a couple of seasons, right? And so I'm very interested to see throughout this week, of course, who the Houston Texans speak with, and just overall the process of how they view some of those tackles, and if some of those tackles in their minds could fit to be guards, maybe a 6'5" guard. We just saw what the Philadelphia Eagles was able to do, and that allowed for Saquon to run for 2,000 and give the protection to Jalen Hurts, especially in the Super Bowl on the inside that he needed. So I'm curious to see, like you mentioned, what is his plan? What's the Houston Texan plans, and how they are able to execute it starting off with this week. So it'll be a good week.
Another thing too is that the most interesting thing about this is if he does trade the pick, if he does trade the first round pick and move back into some of the later rounds, one thing that we do know about DeMeco Ryans and Nick Caserio is that they know how to work late round magic. They know how to go and find those diamond in the roughs that are in those later rounds. And I mean later rounds, like, you know, starting at the third round on. I mean, we've seen some of the players that they've been able to get in the third round who has contributed to the team and has made a very strong impact. So that's going to be another thing that some of these guys that are going to interview with the Houston Texans who may not think that they're a fit may be the exact fit. And like I said, you look at those later rounds, you look at some of the things that they've done in the later round. And I will say this, you know, for their Nick Caserio has missed on some picks. Don't get me wrong. He has missed on some picks, but he's hit on a lot of them as well. And I think with the draft that him and D'Amico has put together the last 2 years, they've hit more than they miss. And so that's one thing that's going to be interesting. I remember, I want to say 2 years ago, this had to be right after they drafted D'Amico Ryans. And right here in Indianapolis at the Combine, I asked him on the podium about working with some of those guys in the later round. And he said, that's the one thing that I love. He said, I love working with those guys in the later rounds because I love developing the type of talent that, you know, that will last. So a guy who doesn't think that he may not have an opportunity, but to be able to develop that guy and move him to be to the place where he needs to be. I mean, there's no more perfect example than middle linebacker Azeez Al-Shaair, who went undrafted coming out of the University of Central Florida, if I'm not mistaken, correct? And came out of there. D'Amico wanted him bad, got him to San Francisco, and look where he is now.
Yeah. Thank you guys for watching today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. Make sure you come back for more Combine talk that we will have this week. I'm John Hickman. Follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12.
And make sure you follow me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Big Star Sports with a Z at the end.
Until next time, ladies and gents and Texans fans across the world.
Nap time!